As the dawn breaks upon a seemingly quiet city, Ella prepares a strong morning drink. The stillness of the morning ends with the ringing of the doorbell. Molly enters the house and complains about Brad, Ella's fiancé. Molly demands to know where Brad disappeared to and asks to see his diary. Ella says that the diary is probably inside Brad's remote storage unit and is precisely why she invited Molly over. Ella wants Molly's help to break into it. Molly hesitates, saying that she doesn't break into stuff anymore. Remembering Brad's other faults, she asks why Ella would even marry him if she didn't trust him. Night falls and, eventually, the two friends get into a car and drive off to Brad's storage unit. Ella assures Molly that all they'll be going after is the diary. Molly is still hesitant, saying that Ella will likely not stop at just the diary. Molly wonders why Ella wants to be conventional about her relationship with Brad. Other than the idea of a happily ever after, she says that marriage turns people into liars. After comparing the marriage between humans, birds, and monkeys, the two friends arrive at Easy Storage. A man named Steven operates the register. Ella notices that Steven has Arnold, a hamster he saved from a recently cleared storage unit. He believes that, sometimes, people can be cruel. Molly hands Steven the card to Brad's storage unit. Ella introduces herself as Brad's fiancé. Steven asks if Brad knows that Ella is looking through his stuff. At first, the girls fear that they might not get through, but Steven laughs it off and lets them in. He reminds them that they shut in 25 minutes. Molly isn't impressed by all the hoarded items locked behind the storage units. As they get into an elevator, Molly notices that all the storage units are underground. Just then, Rashid, a man in a clean suit, comes running towards them, asking to hold the doors for him, but they shut before he gets in. Vince, another man in the elevator and a police detective, asks if the two friends have a unit in the facility. Molly doesn't answer any of his question, but Ella, trying to be friendly, does. Vince gets off at the third floor down. Molly scolds Ella not to go around entertaining a random stranger's question. To get to the fourth floor down, Molly picks the elevator lock. Ella tells her to be cautious about the security camera, but Molly guesses that it probably isn't plugged in at all. With the lock picked, they go down to the fourth underground floor. The fourth underground floor is a dark and dusty hallway of units numbered 4000 to 4100. Brad's unit is 4059. The two friends walk deeper down into the dark. Steven calls for Wayne, the cleaner, through the intercom system. Wayne initially doesn't hear him through the loud music playing in his headset. Wayne meets Steven back at the reception desk. Steven asks him to go take his final rounds and check the fire doors. Down below, Ella and Molly panic as the lights go out one by one, and Ella trips over a bucket. They find Brad's unit, try to open it with the card, but fail. Molly wipes the magnetic strip and tries again. The door unlocks. There are no open lights inside Brad's unit, so Molly flicks open her lighter. She feels a light breeze coming from inside the room. With the dim lighter and the lights flickering in the hallway, Molly asks Ella to run out and turn them back on. Then, a mutilated figure with its mouth sewn shut appears behind Molly from the shadows. It slices at her throat with its sharp nails. The door slams shut as Molly tries to scream for help. Locked out, Ella tries to open the door again. With enough card swipes, she unlocks the door and sees a vile creature next to her now deceased friend. She runs to the elevator as the hallway lights shut off one by one. She gets to the elevator and panics as she presses the buttons to the main floor. The elevator hums to life, but something down below stops it from going up. Ella looks at the escape latch overhead and pushes it open. With enough strength, she pulls herself upward as bloodied hand reaches for her foot. She climbs the sides of the elevator shaft and reaches the next floor. She screams for help through the locked gate. Vince finds her in a panic. He grabs a fire extinguisher and busts the lock open. Ella runs into the hallway and takes cover in the next corridor. With Ella panicking, Vince tries to calm her down. A lady named Willow enters as Ella explains that her friend is gone. She claims a creature is prowling around on the lower floor. Vince offers to check the lower floor. He leaves Willow to keep Ella safe. With his gun drawn, Vince steps down into the elevator shaft. He drops down into the cabin cautiously. The lights downstairs flicker as Vince walks down the damp hall. More lights flicker on as he investigates and walks towards Unit 4059. Vince pulls out the key card and fails to unlock the door with it. Almost giving up, he then finds Molly's bloody handprint on the door frame. Upstairs, Willow offers Ella something for her nerves, but Ella declines. Vince arrives and tells them that he found nothing. As Ella struggles to explain what she saw down below, Vince questions if Ella was in the right state of mind. In another storage unit, a couple named Ian and Sarah dig through their inventory, searching for a specific pair of shoes. They are setting up for their future divorce. With the facility closing, Wayne asks if they are almost done. Sarah asks for a little bit more time. Sarah complains about Ian not saying anything to help her. Irritated, Ian calls his soon-to-be divorced wife, entitled. Wayne plays around the hallways as he makes his rounds. He opens one of the storage units in secret and covers the smoke detector with duct tape. Then he lights it and happily smokes it. He hears something moving outside the unit and goes to check it out. He finds a wet piece of cloth on the floor. The lights go out one by one. On the last one, the mutilated creature appears beside Wayne and plunges a screwdriver into his head. Vince goes over Ella's story. He reveals that Brad's unit number isn't even on the 4th underground level, but rather on the 3rd. Ella explains that she did all this because she believes that Brad is cheating on her. Ella demands an explanation for all of Vince's questions, and in her desperation, requests that Vince should at least review the camera footage for evidence. As they agree, Willow asks if they could first check on her unit. With no one willing to join her, she follows the group upstairs. Steven receives a notification on his desktop screen saying that the inspection on the fire doors remains incomplete. He rings up Wayne, but he doesn't respond. Steven gets up, annoyed, to check on the unresponsive cleaner. He marches through the hallways, expecting to find his co-worker. He instead finds the mutilated creature, who eyes him with hunger. Sarah keeps on digging through their stuff. The couple discuss their share of their assets once the divorce comes through. Both insult each other's ability to find intimate partners. Sarah, determined to shut Ian down, tells him to go upstairs and ask the management to keep the facility open until she's done. Ian leaves and walks out into the hallway. Vince and company arrive at a locked doorway. Willow tells them about her medication for diabetes, and that she has to take it. Vince tells the group to check their phones for a signal. With Ella's phone lost, none of them can contact anyone outside. They hear a door shut and they see Ian. Vince asks if Ian is the man that Ella saw earlier. Ella tells them again that what she saw earlier wasn't a man. Sarah digs into a cardboard box and finds the shoes she's been looking for. She excitedly tries them on in front of a mirror. She hears something moving outside the unit and assumes it to be Ian. She asks if he has spoken to the management. Getting no response, she peeks outside and sees no one. Walking back into the room, Sarah picks up her bag and looks at her reflection once more. The lights outside the unit shut off, and Sarah storms off towards the light switch. Returning to the unit, Sarah doesn't see something watching her from behind the boxes. Sarah sees a broken statuette on the floor just outside their unit. As she goes to pick it up, something ambushes her from behind. It picks her up and slams her headfirst onto the floor. An unconscious Sarah is dragged back into the unit, leaving a red streak across the floor. Ian asks their group if any of them saw the disfigured person that Ella described. Willow backs up Vince's hunch that Ella was high on something. Ella defends herself and accuses Willow of being high on her pills. Ella tells Vince that whatever was down there murdered Molly. Realizing there may be a threat, Ian runs back down the stairs to check on Sarah. Taking a gun out, Vince pulls Sarah and Willow toward a corner and aims for the lock on the gate. He shoots, but misses. Ella suggests that instead of shooting pointlessly at the lock, they should go help anyone who might still be on the lower floors. Ian calls out to Sarah as he walks through the hallways. He finds the red streak that Sarah left behind. He darts through the halls, crying out to his maybe lost wife. Vince and company discover the red streak on the floor. Ian arrives shortly after and asks them to help him find his wife. Vince points his gun at Ian, asking him to explain himself. Ian doesn't want to waste time and tries to leave them in search of Sarah. Ella tries to convince the group to focus on getting out of the facility to call the police. From a far corner of the hall, something shatters. Vince leads them toward it, with his gun pointed straight ahead. The group arrive in front of another storage unit and Rashid, baseball bat in hand, tries to scare them off. Vince pins Rashid onto the opposite unit. Vince raids Rashid's unit, and Willow realizes that Rashid's converted his unit into a home after losing his job. Vince sees a blade mounted on the wall, and Rashid stops him from touching it, claiming it to be a ceremonial relic from his grandfather. As Rashid demands his badge number, Vince explains their situation. Ella says that it wasn't somebody, but something that attacked her friend. Rashid admits that there is something weird going on around the facility, a weird kind of moaning from the lower floor. Rashid explains that there is a maintenance closet down the hallway, so they should go to seek help there. A presence watches them as they march to the maintenance closet. With the gun pointed forward, Vince pushes the closet door open. They find a pair of bolt cutters and a circular saw to cut the lock with. Outside, the lights begin to shut off again. Ella takes some tape and secures the timers to stop them from turning off the lights. To distress, Willow takes a cigarette and lights it, despite the facility's no smoking policy. With Vince commanding everyone to go back to the locked gate, Ian demands them to help him find his wife. A still skeptical Vince dissects Ian's relationship with his soon-to-be ex-wife and accuses him of murdering her for all the divorce settlements. The smoke from Willow's cigarette activates the fire alarms, and water rains down on them. Vince directs their group to run back to the gate. From the shadows, the disfigured person emerges and tackles Willow onto the floor. Vince pulls out his gun and shoots the figure in the shoulder. The figure disappears into a corridor. Not noticing that the rest of the group hasn't followed him, Rashid runs into the next corridor. Ella, Ian, Vince, and Willow become trapped as the doorway into the next hallway has closed, with Rashid on the other side. Vince explains to Rashid that there is a creature lurking about in the facility. He directs Rashid to go and cut the lock at the gate. Rashid pauses as he stares at the shadows ahead of him. Something approaches him. He readies the circular saw. Ella and the group hear Rashid get slammed against the locked doorway. They hear the circular saw buzzing closer and closer towards a screaming Rashid. Shortly, the screaming stops and blood spills through the door gap. Willow panics and exclaims that all of them are going to perish. Vince tries to comfort her, but his words ring hollow in the wake of what just happened. Willow remembers that there is another door on the other side of the building. With Ian slightly reluctant, Ella tells him that he would be more of a help to his wife alive. The group march through the blinking red lights of the hallways. They arrive at a locked doorway, and Vince shoots through the lock. They climb the staircase upwards, only to find that the exit has been bricked up. Ella suggests that they try the other stairwell. Shooting through another lock, the group find themselves in another dark hallway. Ella tapes over another switch as the lights turn on. They discover that the doorway up there is closed as well. Vince becomes more and more infuriated. Ignoring Ian's resistance, Vince decides that the group must go down to the third lowest level for another chance to escape. Ian tries to win Ella over, telling her that Vince is losing it. She advises him that if he wants them to get out alive, he should stop getting on the detective's nerves. Vince leads them to a storage unit where he takes out a backpack. As Ian reaches for the bag to check its contents, Vince pulls away. The detective threatens Ian to stay away from the backpack. Ian confronts Vince about his leadership. He tells the detective that the only reason they're following him anywhere is because of the gun he carries. Vince tackles Ian and slams him into the wall. Vince puts his gun in Ian's mouth, warning him angrily to keep it shut. Willow discovers the contents of the bag, money, lots of it. Ella demands an explanation from Vince. With the accusations being thrown around and the threat of being investigated, Vince points his gun at the group. Convinced that no one else is going to oppose him, Vince turns his back on them. Ian insults Vince and the corruption of the entire New York police force. Vince does not like that. Vince remembers that Ian works in advertising. He compares their living situations and, deciding that enough is enough, leaves the group to fend for themselves. With their last line of defense gone, Ella takes on the leadership of the group. She remembers that Molly felt a breeze back on the 4th level below. Willow feels like she's about to pass out and needs to take her insulin. She tells the group that she keeps some back at her unit and that she would prefer to go there alone. As Vince walks alone through the hallways, he hears a moaning out in the distance. His backpack gets snagged on a wall-mounted fire extinguisher, and some of his money falls to the floor. Not wanting to waste any, he goes down on his knees to pick the money up. Distracted and unarmed, something rushes towards Vince and rams him into the wall. A sword pierces through his stomach. Dazed and gasping for life, the sword slices through his neck. Meanwhile, the others follow Willow to her unit. Willow tells them to wait for her just outside as she takes her insulin. With the others outside, Willow digs through a box and takes out a smaller box with a pile of paraphernalia inside. She puts a strap around her upper arm and readies a syringe of morphine. She injects it into her arm, and soon, the world around her slows down. Ella and Ian walk in on her and discover other medications inside the boxes. With Willow's consciousness slowed down, Ella decides that they must lock her inside the unit. Unable to disagree, Willow directs them to a box of supplements where they find a gun they can use. As her companions lock the door shut, Willow drifts off into sleep. Ella and Ian navigate through the hallways. Ella thanks Ian for not being too difficult around her. Ian asks what she is even doing down there to begin with. Ella tells him about her fiancé's diary. She admits that she wants to have some control over their relationship. Eventually, they arrive at the elevator. Willow wakes up to a grating sound outside her unit. She arms herself with a syringe loaded with a heavy sedative. The door unlocks, and she crawls underneath the shelves. Whatever it is that unlocked the door shoves the shelf onto Willow, who accidentally stabs herself with the syringe. Now unconscious, something picks Willow up and covers her in bubble wrap. She is then dragged out of the unit. Ella and Ian find themselves on the abandoned 4th underground floor. Ian takes the lead and asks Ella to unlock the door to Unit 5054. The door immediately unlocks, and they carefully enter. The lights flash open, and the duo see a corridor of cells with feeding tubes. Ella pushes one of the doors open and discovers a surgery table inside. Ian observes the corridor and finds one of his wife's shoes in front of one of the doors. Shocked, he readies to open the door. Ella finds Stephen's red Easy storage hat on a table and rushes to tell Ian about it. She surmises that Stephen is the one behind all this. The door in front of them bursts open and Ian opens fire. Shocked, he sees his wife Sarah sliding against the wall, with a bleeding bullet hole through her stomach. Sarah's mouth has been sewn shut too. The other prisoners wake up in a chorus of muffled screams. Another man in an opposite room approaches and tells the prisoners to quiet down. Ella takes a shocked Ian into one of the rooms. Ella realizes that the disfigured person she saw earlier was not a creature, but another human being. The lights turn on in the corridor and Stephen walks in. Stephen marches towards an operating table and slices open something wrapped in bubble wrap. Holding a hammer in hand, he tells the thing that he needs to operate on it so that it can drink. He hits it over the mouth with a hammer and proceeds to staple its mouth shut, then leaves shortly after. Ian peeks through the door, hoping that Stephen has gone away. Stephen appears just behind the door and shoots Ian in the head with the staple gun. Ian shoots at Stephen, but Willow's gun has run out of bullets. Stephen knocks him onto the floor. Ella tries to tackle him, but Stephen is too large to take down easily. Ian begs Ella to run away. Stephen can't risk anyone getting away and chases Ella out into the dark corridor. Ella runs into the elevator and closes the doors behind her. She pushes the button to the topmost floor, and the elevator hums to life. Unfortunately, Stephen knows which wires to cut to stop the elevator from working. A few snips later, and the elevator stops on the 3rd underground floor, forcing Ella to get off. Ella runs into the corridors, but Stephen appears as she turns a corner. Stephen takes out a carry-on switch and activates the door behind her. Luckily, Ella finds Brad's unit, unlocks it, and hides in it. Stephen, having lost sight of Ella, walks just past the unit. Ella switches the light on. Inside, she finds neatly stacked boxes with sticker labels. She scans the room, hoping to find something relevant to her. One of the box labels reads, Ella's stuff. Ella takes out an old notebook and accidentally knocks some stuff off from the shelf and onto the floor. Realizing the noise that she just made, she immediately goes to hide. Steven unlocks the door to Brad's unit. He warily walks in. Ella finds Brad's golf clubs, takes one, and slams Steven in the head with it. Steven is relentless and easily swats her away. He smashes through the other boxes, trying to chase after Ella. Ella falls over and Steven pulls her by the legs. Out of nowhere, the disfigured person from before smashes a glass ornament on Steven's head. The disfigured person tries to choke Steven. Steven reaches for a pile of clutter across them. He grabs a ballpoint pen and jabs it into the disfigured person's neck. In shock, the disfigured person pulls the pen out, and he begins to bleed a lot. Steven, unfazed, proceeds to leave the room as the disfigured person bleeds out. Ella runs for her life, but Steven corners her. Ella wakes up on a surgery table, next to an unconscious and modified Ian. Steven tells her that she has caused him much trouble by letting Jeffrey, the disfigured person, out of his cell. He claims that he is going to take care of everything. He is going to make all their problems from their old lives disappear. Steven takes out Ella's old notebook and reads from it. The notes inside reveal Ella's wild past with her previous partner, a colorful past that Steven says Brad won't be able to accept. Ella tries to reason with Steven, asking him to let her go. She tells him that people will come to look for them. Steven says that people rarely come looking for anyone they've lost. As Steven prepares to modify Ella, he finds his staple gun needs to be refilled, and leaves the room for a bit. Ian wakes up and hands Ella a scalpel. She cuts through her restraints and waits. Steven comes back with a loaded nail gun. As he leans over to open her mouth, Ella plunges the scalpel into Steven's back. With her captor struggling to stand, she takes the notebook and runs, as a still restrained Ian cries out for help. Ella runs back down into the lower floor and enters the sewage system. She hides in a corner as Steven passes her by. With the coast clear, Ella takes a step forward, but falls onto the cold body of her friend Molly, lying on the wet sewer floor. She lets out a scream. Hearing this, Steven comes back around and runs after her. Ella finds a ladder leading up to the surface. She hurriedly climbs up it. Pushing the grate open, her notebook falls out and lands on the edge of the opening. Ella doesn't notice until she closes the grate back down. Not wanting to lose the notebook, she reopens the grate and reaches for it. Then, a meaty hand grabs her arm and pulls her back down. Weeks pass, and Steven is back behind the reception desk, typing away at his computer. Brad, Ella's fiancé, visits the easy storage. He asks to have his unit cleared out with all the stuff he and Ella kept there. For a moment, he considers visiting the unit one last time to check if he has forgotten anything. Concealing a sharp box cutter, Steven grins invitingly. Brad reconsiders, assuring himself that he hasn't forgotten anything. The grin disappears from Steven's face and becomes a lighthearted smile. Brad asks Steven to just sell everything inside the unit. When asked where he would like the income to go, he simply points to Arnold, the hamster. Below, underneath all the buried secrets and layers of concrete, Ella sits in a dark room with cheeks wet from her tears and her mouth stapled shut, just like the many, many, many others.